That man emerged from the inner city to become one of the most promising entrepreneurs in the United States. But upon reaching the top, he forgot the woman who helped him get there, his mother. Months later, their reunion happens in the most painful way possible. And it is in this clash of realities that he discovers the true meaning of success. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. James Miller, 38, stood on the 32nd floor of his company on Fifth Avenue, New York City, as the new symbol of American technological entrepreneurship. TM Solutions, founded in a tiny apartment in Chinatown, Lower Manhattan, now occupied a mirrored skyscraper overlooking the New York City metropolis. What began as a logistics app during his college days at NYU had transformed into an empire of digital solutions that revolutionized the North American market. That Wednesday morning, James observed New York City through his office's panoramic window. His image reflected in the glass showed a tall, broad-shouldered man with a neatly trimmed beard, wearing a tailored Italian suit that contrasted with the rubber flip-flops he wore on his feet, his trademark since his startup days. Employees loved this combination, which symbolized the balance between professionalism and the innovative informality that characterized his leadership. James, the candidate for the communication advisor position has arrived. Denise's voice. His secretary for 8 years interrupted his thoughts. Fiona Davies. Impressive resume, just as you requested. Send her in, he replied, moving away from the window. Fiona Davies entered with the demeanor of someone who had already secured the position. Tall, light brown skin, straightened black hair pulled back into an impeccable bun, and piercing brown eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail of the environment. Her charcoal grey pantsuit exuded calculated sophistication. Mr. Miller, she extended her hand firmly, it's an honor to finally meet you in person. James dismissed formalities. Please, just James, everyone here calls me that. Of course, she replied with a practiced smile. I prefer you call me Nan. All my clients do. During the interview, Fiona, or Nan as she insisted, presented an impressive portfolio. She had transformed unknown entrepreneurs into corporate celebrities, secured magazine covers for charisma-lacking CEOs, and even reversed seemingly irreversible image crises. Her eyes sparkled as she spoke of strategic narratives and public perception architecture. What do you see when you look at me, Nan? James asked, leaning back in his chair. She analyzed him for a few seconds. I see a diamond that just needs the right polishing. You have the essence, an inspiring story, natural charisma, a recognizable look. But you haven't even reached 30% of your influence potential. I can transform you into the leading voice of American innovation in less than a year. James smiled. It was exactly what he wanted to hear. 3 months later, Fiona's hiring was already proving to be a watershed moment. James's image had been completely recalibrated. Speeches at international conferences, interviews on TV shows, strategic partnerships with universities. She orchestrated everything down to the smallest detail. Your diction has improved a lot, Nan commented, as they reviewed a lecture recording. But you still need to stop gesticulating so much when you talk about your mother. It conveys insecurity. The mention of Mrs. Selina, his mother, made James smile. She's my inspiration, a retired teacher who raised 2 children alone after my father abandoned us. How can I not speak of her with emotion? Fiona adjusted her black-framed glasses. I understand perfectly. But we are building the visionary James, not the devoted son James. They are complementary narratives, but distinct. In the apartment where he lived on the Upper East Side, Manhattan, James spoke almost daily by phone with Mrs. Selina, who still lived in the same simple house in the Bronx, New York City. At 72, she maintained a community garden and gave volunteer adult literacy classes at the neighborhood association. Mom, did you see the report in Forbes magazine? James asked during one of these calls. Yes, my son, I did. I almost didn't recognize you in that blue suit, saying all those difficult words. Mrs. Selina laughed. But I liked it when you talked about the little school where I used to teach. That was Nan's idea. She said family overcoming stories connect with the public. That Nan seems to understand a lot about your work, Mrs. Selina commented. When will I meet her? Soon, Mom. I barely have time to breathe. As the months passed, the relationship between James and Fiona evolved into something beyond professional. Not a romance. Nan made it clear she didn't mix business with pleasure, but an almost mystical symbiosis. She anticipated his needs, shaped his opinions, refined his discourse. She had become his confidant, advisor, and in a way, an extension of his own consciousness. One Friday afternoon, after a lunch with investors, Fiona presented James with an idea she called the next level. "We need to work on your philanthropic side," she explained, showing an impeccably organized dossier. "I've created the TM Foundation for Social Innovation. It will focus on technology for vulnerable communities. We already have partners and an initial team." James flipped through the material, impressed. "Incredible. But why didn't you consult me beforehand?" Fiona smiled. "I wanted to surprise you with something complete. You just need to sign here and transfer the initial amount. We'll launch it at an event at the California Science Center in Los Angeles. The President of the United States has confirmed attendance." As he signed the documents, James thought about how proud his mother would be. Mrs. Selina always said that wealth without purpose was just empty accumulation. "I have another proposal," Fiona continued, hesitant. It was rare to see her like this. "It's about your mother." James looked up, surprised. "I received reports from the security team. The Bronx is becoming increasingly dangerous. Her house doesn't have an adequate alarm system. The locks are old. She lives alone." "I've already tried to convince her to move closer to me," James interrupted. "She refuses." Fiona placed a luxurious catalogue on the table. "The Serenity Villa, the best residential for active seniors in North America. Individual suites, 24-hour medical assistance, cultural activities, organic garden. She would love it. It's in Aspen, Colorado, perfect climate." James examined the photos of the impressive space. "It looks like a 5-star resort." And it is. Exclusive, discreet, and with strict privacy protocols. Ideal for mothers of public figures like you are becoming. Fiona paused strategically. "By the way, one thing we need to manage is her public appearances. The simple clothes, the sometimes informal English. My mother is a simple woman, Nan." "Exactly. That's beautiful. But people expect consistency in the story we're telling. The brilliant, innovative, sophisticated son, and the mother. The mother who made me who I am," James completed, feeling a pang of irritation. "Of course. That's precisely why she deserves the best. In this residential, she'll have everything she needs. And you'll be able to visit her without the risks of the Bronx or unwanted exposure." In the following weeks, the idea planted by Fiona began to gain traction in James's mind, especially when, during a Sunday visit, he found the lock on Mrs. Selina's house broken, the result of a thwarted break-in attempt by the neighbor who scared off the intruders. The neighborhood was truly changing. "Mum, we need to talk about your safety," James said after lunch, as Mrs. Selina served coffee in old cups she had kept since her wedding. Mrs. Selina observed her son with those brown eyes that seemed to see beyond spoken words. "Safety? I've lived here for almost 40 years, James. I know every neighbor, every corner. Times have changed, Mum. You yourself told me about the attempted break-in." Mrs. Selina waved her hand in the air as if shooing a fly. "It was just a scare. Juvenile from the bakery installed a camera that points to my door. And Marlene from number 43 keeps an eye out. Here everyone looks out for everyone." James sighed, recognizing that stubbornness he had inherited. "I have a proposal. I found an amazing place in Aspen, Colorado." In the following minutes, he enthusiastically described the Serenity Villa residential, emphasizing the community garden and the classes she could offer to other residents. He showed photos on his phone, highlighting the beauty of the Rocky Mountains visible from the windows. "It's a paradise. Mom, and I'll pay for everything." Mrs. Selina listened in silence, stirring her already cold coffee. When James finished, she simply said, "No, no, you didn't even properly consider it." "I did consider it. That place is for rich people who have nothing else to do with their lives. I have my literacy students. I have my work in the community garden. I have my crochet friends on Thursdays. My life is here," James insisted, presenting increasingly elaborate arguments about quality of life, safety, and comfort. Mrs. Selina remained unyielding. The following Sunday, James returned with company. Fiona Davies, impeccably dressed even on a casual Sunday, carried a folder of documents and her most convincing professional smile. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Mrs. Selina, James talks a lot about you. The elderly woman observed the younger woman with ill-concealed suspicion. Sit down, my dear. I made cornmeal cake. During coffee, Fiona charmed Mrs. Selina with stories about the newly created foundation's social projects, asked about her adult teaching techniques, and genuinely praised the photos of old students displayed on the living room wall. Gradually, the elderly woman's resistance waned. Mrs. Selina, I came personally because I have a concern about James. The matriarch straightened in her chair. What's wrong with my son? He hasn't been sleeping well for weeks. Do you know why? Concern for you. With every news of violence in this area, he panics. James, who had been observing the conversation in silence, nodded dramatically. The move to the Serenity Villa wouldn't just be for your safety, Fiona continued, but for his mental health. The stress is affecting his performance, his decisions. The company employs hundreds of people who depend on him. Mrs. Selina looked at her son. Is that true, James? I've been having nightmares, Mom, he confessed, surprised by the ease of the lie. I dream that I arrive here and the house is empty, that something has happened to you. Mrs. Selina's expression softened. My son, I don't want to be a cause for concern. It would be temporary, Fiona quickly added. A 3-month trial. If you don't like it, you come back home. We'll keep everything here intact. 2 more visits and 5 weeks of persuasion were needed, until Mrs. Selina finally relented. The definitive argument came when James mentioned he would need to travel for 2 months to expand business in Europe. I would feel more at ease knowing you're in a safe place during my absence, he said. On moving day, the small house in the Bronx was the scene of emotional goodbyes. Neighbors brought flowers and cakes. Elderly students from the literacy program recited texts they had learned to write with her. Mrs. Marlene from number 43 cried copiously. It's only for a few months, Mrs. Selina repeated as she hugged each one. I'll be back soon to torment you all. Fiona observed everything discreetly, checking her watch from time to time. She had hired a luxury moving company, and 2 uniformed nurses awaited to accompany Mrs. Selina on the trip to Aspen, Colorado. Everything was meticulously organized. Everything is ready in your apartment there, Mrs. Selina, Fiona said, handing her an envelope. Here are your suite documents, the residential regulations, and a new cell phone with our location programmed into the GPS. Any problem? Just press the red button. James helped his mother into the adapted van with air conditioning and reclining seats. He hugged her for a long time. I'll visit you as soon as I get back from Europe, I promise. It'll only be 2 months. Mrs. Selina held her son's face between her wrinkled hands. Take care, my boy, and don't let success extinguish that sparkle in your eyes. The van departed, leaving behind a small waving crowd. James felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Fiona placed her hand on his shoulder. You did the right thing. She'll love it. That same night, Fiona presented James with a series of documents for signature. They are for the Serenity Villa. Premium care package, medical expenses, special activities. All unlimited, as we agreed. James signed without reading, trusting his advisor completely. He also authorized monthly transfers to a company called Serene Senior Care. It's the company that manages the exclusive services, Fiona explained. It's not in the basic residential package. The trip to Europe, initially planned for 2 months, extended to 4. The expansion of TM Solutions into the European market required more time than anticipated. James tried to call his mother daily, but rarely managed to speak with her. Mrs. Selina is in watercolor class, the attendant would say. She went out for an excursion to the botanical garden. Another time, they would inform. She's in a session with the physical therapist and asked not to be interrupted. When he did manage to speak with his mother, the conversations were short and superficial. Mrs. Selina seemed strangely reserved. Everything's fine, son. Don't worry about me. Video calls never worked properly. Signal problems in the mountains, they would justify. Meanwhile, James's career reached new heights. Fiona orchestrated his participation in international economic forums, negotiated a monthly column in a major business magazine, and even a documentary about his journey for a streaming platform. We need scenes with your mother for the documentary, the director commented during a meeting. She's a bit reclusive right now, Fiona quickly replied. We can use old photos and off-screen testimonials. Back in the United States, 6 months after Mrs. Selena's departure, James found himself completely immersed in the whirlwind of his corporate life. Promises of visits to Aspen, Colorado were constantly postponed. "Next week, without fail, I'll see my mom," he told himself every Friday. When he expressed this intention to Fiona, she always had an unmissable commitment to present. "Impossible. James, we have the new platform launch on Monday. Just this weekend, Forbes magazine wants to do that photo shoot." The governor confirmed his presence at Sunday's dinner. "You can't cancel." When a year had passed since Mrs. Selena's move, James realized he still hadn't visited his mother at the residential facility. Video calls continued to be problematic, and phone conversations were increasingly rare and brief. In a rare moment of introspection, sitting alone in his penthouse apartment after a charity event, James felt the weight of his mother's absence. He called the Serenity Villa. "Good evening. I'd like to speak with Mrs. Selena Miller." After a few minutes of waiting, a polite voice replied, "Mr. Miller, we don't have any resident by that name." "What do you mean?" "My mother has been there for a year. Selena Miller, 73 years old. One moment, please." The wait seemed endless. "Mr. Miller, we've checked all records for the past 3 years. There's no Selena Miller or any variation of that name." James felt his blood run cold. "There must be some mistake. My advisor, Fiona Davies, organized everything. I have payment receipts, contracts." "We have no partnership with any Fiona Davies, sir." With trembling hands, James ended the call and immediately phoned Fiona. The call went to voicemail. He tried 5 more times with the same result. Desperate, he searched the company's archives for the Serenity Villa documents. He found contracts with seemingly legitimate logos and signatures, but the phone number indicated was different from the official number he had just called. A terrible suspicion began to form in his mind. "Denise, I need the statements for all transfers to Serene Senior Care over the last year," he requested from his secretary in the morning. The fine rain falling over New York City didn't bother Mrs. Selena. Sitting on an improvised bench made of market crates under the awning of a closed commercial establishment in South Jamaica, Queens, she methodically organized the materials she would use that morning. Carefully selected newspaper scraps, some old magazines, colorful plastic bottle caps, and a piece of chalk found near a school. "Today we're going to work on the letter M. Mrs. Josephine, M for mother, for world, for morning," she patiently explained to a woman in her 60s, who watched her attentively. Around Mrs. Selena, a small group of homeless people and informal workers from the area gathered. The sidewalk teacher, as she was known, had become a beloved figure in that forgotten corner of the metropolis. No one there knew exactly how Mrs. Selena had ended up on the streets. She herself avoided the subject, deftly changing the conversation when someone asked about her past. What they knew was that, approximately 8 months earlier, she had appeared at the City Hope shelter, without documents, and with only the clothes on her back and a small bag containing a notebook, a pen, and a faded photo of a young man graduating from university. In the overcrowded shelter with precarious conditions, Mrs. Selena quickly stood out for her organization and community spirit. Instead of lamenting her situation, she began to help with meal distribution, dormitory organization, and most importantly, started giving impromptu adult literacy classes. "Were you a teacher before?" the shelter coordinator once asked her. "My whole life," she replied with a serene smile. Teaching is breathing. When the City Hope shelter was shut down by the health department after a series of complaints about unsanitary conditions, Mrs. Selena and dozens of other residents found themselves homeless again. Some managed to secure spots in other social assistance facilities, but most, including her, ended up on the streets. It was then that Mrs. Selena, defying all expectations for a woman her age in such a vulnerable situation, transformed adversity into a mission. She chose a wide sidewalk in South Jamaica, Queens, near a soup distribution point run by a local church, and there established her classroom. "Letters are like people," she would tell her impromptu students. "Each one has its personality, its way of being. The A is open, welcoming. The B is plump, full of stories to tell." In a few months, her classes attracted not only homeless people, but also local shopkeepers, mothers waiting for their children at the nearby school, and even some curious young people passing by on their way to work. "My name," exclaimed an emotional Mr. Jenkins, a 67-year-old man who sold candy at traffic lights, upon being able to write his own name for the first time. "Look, teacher, I wrote my name." Mrs. Selina hugged the elderly man, her chest tight with pride. "And now no one can take that away from you, Mr. Jenkins. Knowledge is the only thing they can't take from us." News about the sidewalk teacher began to spread through the neighborhood. The bakery owner started saving day-old bread for her to distribute during classes. A hairdresser offered her salon's bathroom so Mrs. Selina could wash herself. The owner of the construction supply store donated a small chalkboard that was going to be discarded. Gradually, an informal support network formed around that gray-haired woman with tired but lively eyes, who seemed to find strength in her daily mission. At night, Mrs. Selina slept in the improvised shelter she had created with cardboard and tarps under the awning. Her greatest treasure, her son's photo, was kept in a plastic bag inside her bra, protected from moisture and potential theft. Sometimes when she thought no one was watching, she would take out the photograph and gaze at it for a long time. "Where are you, my boy?" she whispered to the image. "What did they do to you? What did they do to us?" In her memory there were still inexplicable gaps. She remembered the house in the Bronx, the goodbyes to neighbors, the comfortable van, but after that, confused fragments. A place that wasn't what was promised. Documents she needed to sign. A man saying her son had cancelled everything. The feeling of abandonment at an unknown bus station. Without money, without documents, without a destination. Meanwhile, just a few miles away in the parallel universe of Wall Street, Manhattan's skyscrapers, James Miller was reaching the peak of his career. TM Solutions had become a technology giant, headquartered in the United States with branches in 5 countries. Its expansion into Europe and the United States was celebrated as a success story of American innovation on the global stage. That specific afternoon, James participated in a panel on corporate social responsibility at North America's most prestigious business event. Beside him, CEOs of multinationals and high-ranking politicians discussed the role of companies in social development. "What motivated me to create the TM Foundation was my own story," he spoke with the eloquence Fiona had trained for years. "I come from a simple family, raised by a teacher mother, who taught me that knowledge and opportunity go hand in hand. Today we bring technology and digital education to communities that public authorities cannot reach." Enthusiastic applause followed his speech. No one noticed the slight tremor in his voice when mentioning his mother. Backstage, Fiona awaited him with a satisfied smile. In recent months, after the disturbing episode of the call to the Serenity Villa, she had managed to convince him that it had all been just an administrative misunderstanding. "Your mother is in a special wing, with a different alias for privacy reasons," she explained, showing seemingly legitimate documents. "It's a protocol for family members of public figures, precisely to avoid harassment or extortion attempts." To appease James's anxiety, Fiona began providing detailed monthly reports on Mrs. Selina's health and activities, supposedly prepared by the residential's medical team. She also provided handwritten letters imitating the elderly woman's handwriting. "She prefers not to talk on the phone because her hearing is failing," she would justify, "and video calls make her anxious. You know how averse she is to technology." Gradually, James's concerns were buried by the avalanche of professional commitments. The persistent guilt about not visiting his mother was constantly postponed by promises of next month, without fail. After the event, while being escorted to the executive car that would take him to dinner with investors, James was approached by a young journalist. "Mr. Miller, Marianne Wells from Social Impact magazine. Could you comment on allegations that your foundation is merely a front for tax deductions?" James stopped, stunned. Fiona quickly interjected. "The TM Foundation has public reports and external audits. Any accusation of this kind is completely unfounded and will be handled legally." The journalist insisted, "And what about the rumors that you abandoned your own mother to improve your corporate image?" The world seemed to freeze around James. His eyes met those of the reporter, a young woman no older than 25, determined and fearless. "That's absurd," he managed to stammer. "My mother is well cared for in which institution exactly?" the journalist pressed. "No one can locate her. Your old neighbor, Mrs. Marlene, filed a missing persons report 8 months ago. The intervention of the security guards prevented the conversation from continuing. Marianne was escorted away, but not before handing James a card. The truth always comes out, Mr. Miller. Better it comes from you. In the car, Fiona tried to calm him down. These are intimidation tactics. James, probably competitors trying to destabilize you before the new platform launch. Marlene filed a police report? He asked, still in shock. That meddling neighbor has always been problematic. She probably didn't accept that your mother finally had a better standard of living. People like that are envious, you know. But a seed of doubt had been planted. That night James couldn't sleep. The journalist's words echoed in his mind. He reviewed the monthly reports Fiona gave him, his mother's supposed letters, the transfer receipts to Serene Senior Care. Something didn't fit. Fit never had. The next morning he dismissed his driver and for the first time in years drove his own car. Without telling anyone, he headed for the Bronx. He needed to speak with Mrs. Marlene personally. Arriving at the street where he had grown up, he barely recognized the place. Some houses had been converted into small businesses. Others had taller walls. His mother's house, however, remained intact, though visibly closed for a long time. He knocked on the neighbor's door. A woman with completely white hair answered, leaning on a cane. "Mrs. Marlene." The elderly woman's eyes widened in recognition and then filled with fury. "How dare you show your face here?" After everything that happened, James recoiled a step, stunned by Mrs. Marlene's hostile reaction. "What happened? Please tell me. I'm trying to understand." The elderly woman stared at him, suspicious. After a long moment of hesitation, she opened the door wider. "Come in. I don't want the neighbors to see the great James Miller at my door. I've had enough trouble because of your name." In the modest and impeccably organized living room, James sat uncomfortably while Mrs. Marlene prepared coffee. On the walls, family photos shared space with images of Catholic saints and a local pharmacy calendar. "So what do you want to know?" she asked, placing a steaming cup in front of him. "Where is your mother?" "Is that it?" "Yes," James replied, his voice choked. I think something is wrong." Mrs. Marlene let out a bitter laugh. "Something's been wrong for a year and a half, young man. Ever since that woman in the pantsuit with the fake smile convinced Mrs. Selina to leave everything behind." In the following minutes, James listened to the neighbor's detailed account. How Selina had promised to call upon arriving at that residential facility. How weeks passed without news. How Mrs. Marlene tried without success to contact the number Fiona had left. "When I called your company, they said you were traveling. That secretary, Denise, always very polite, but never resolved anything. And that Fiona? She blocked my number when I insisted too much." "You filed a police report?" James asked, remembering the journalist's words. "3, Mrs. Marlene replied firmly. "On the third one, they finally listened to me. A more attentive detective requested camera footage from the bus station in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania." "Philadelphia? What does that have to do with anything?" Mrs. Marlene sighed deeply before continuing. "They found your mother in the footage, James. She was left there alone, without money, without documents. That was approximately a year ago. After that, nothing, as if she had vanished." The ground seemed to disappear beneath James's feet. The cup trembled in his hand, spilling coffee on the table. "My God, what have I done?" Tears began to stream down his face. Mrs. Marlene, despite her initial anger, felt pity upon seeing the genuine despair of the man in front of her. "You didn't know? I thought she was in Aspen, Colorado, in a luxury residential facility. I received monthly reports, letters, all fake, apparently." James ran his hands over his face, trying to organize his thoughts. "I need to find her. Where do I start?" "With the police," Mrs. Marlene replied pragmatically. "The case is still open." In the following weeks, James transformed his search for Mrs. Selina into the absolute priority of his life. He hired private detectives, offered rewards, visited shelters and hostels throughout New York City and neighboring towns. His absence from the company was justified by Denise as a strategic retreat for new product development. Fiona, in turn, had completely disappeared the day after the encounter with the journalist. Her apartment was found empty, her bank accounts closed. Preliminary police investigations revealed that Serene Senior Care was a shell company, registered with false documents. More than $2 million had been diverted from James's accounts over 18 months. On a rainy June night, after another frustrating day of searching, James walked aimlessly through the streets of downtown New York City. He had dismissed his car and security guards, seeking some peace for his tormented thoughts in solitude. Wearing a simple hooded jacket, he passed unnoticed among the hurried passers-by. Near Union Square, his steps led him to a side alley where a group of people clustered around an improvised structure that offered some protection against the persistent drizzle. The aroma of hot food caught his attention, a soup distribution run by volunteers. Moved more by the need for human warmth than by hunger, James approached and accepted a steaming cup of soup offered by a young woman with a kind smile. "First time here?" she asked. James nodded, lacking the energy to elaborate on a response. "Don't worry, everyone's welcome. The soup is good today. Mrs. Selina helped with the seasoning." The name hit James like an electric shock. "Selina?" "Yes, our teacher chef." The volunteer smiled, pointing to a gray-haired woman who was organizing rows of bread on an improvised table. "She teaches reading during the day and helps us with the soup at night. An angel, that woman." With his heart pounding irregularly, James approached slowly. The woman had her back to him, concentrated on her task. She was thinner than he remembered, her hair whiter, but that methodical way of organizing things, the gestures of her hands. There was no doubt. "Mom?" The woman froze. For a long moment, she remained motionless, as if afraid the voice was just a hallucination created by her mind. Slowly she turned. Her brown eyes, now surrounded by more wrinkles, widened in recognition. Her expression transformed into an indescribable mix of emotions: surprise, relief, hurt, love. "James." The world around them ceased to exist. James advanced, hesitant. "Is it really you, Mom?" "My God, it's you!" Mrs. Selina recoiled instinctively, crossing her arms over her chest as if she needed to protect herself. "What are you doing here?" she asked with a trembling voice. "Looking for you. I've been looking for you everywhere for weeks." The people around them began to realize something was happening. Some of the regulars, recognizing Mrs. Selina's discomfort, approached protectively. "Is everything all right, teacher?" asked a middle-aged man. Mrs. Selina took a deep breath. "It's all right, Anthony. This is my son." A murmur ran through the group. Everyone there knew fragments of the sidewalk teacher's story. They knew she had an important son who had abandoned her, though she never went into detail. "Can we talk?" James pleaded. "Please, Mom, I need to explain." Mrs. Selina hesitated but finally nodded. "I'll finish here in an hour. Wait for me there." She pointed to a park bench under a tree. That hour of waiting was one of the longest in James's life. He watched his mother work from a distance. The delicacy with which she served people, the individualized attention she gave to each one, the kind words she distributed along with the food. Despite the adverse circumstances, she maintained the dignity and generosity that had always characterized her. When she finally sat beside him on the bench, silence weighed heavily between the two for long minutes. "I didn't know," James finally said, his voice choked. "I swear on my life that I didn't know what happened to you. I thought you were being well cared for, safe." Mrs. Selina observed him carefully, as if trying to read the truth in his eyes. "The driver said you had cancelled everything, that you no longer wanted unnecessary expenses." "Never. I would never say something like that." James felt indignation swell. "It was all a lie, Mom. Fiona deceived me. Deceived all of us." In the following minutes, he told her everything. The false reports, the forged letters, the shell company, the embezzlement of money. With each revelation, Mrs. Selina's face showed new signs of understanding, the pieces finally fitting together. "Where have you been sleeping?" "How have you been living?" James asked, observing his mother's worn clothes, her calloused hands. Mrs. Selina explained about the now-closed shelter, the nights under the awning, the network of solidarity that had formed around her. "I teach during the day on the sidewalk in South Jamaica, Queens. I have students of all ages. At night, I help with soup distribution here and at the Hope Project at Grand Central. Terminal on Wednesdays and Fridays." James could barely breathe in the face of that woman's strength. "I'm taking you home right now. My penthouse has 3 empty bedrooms." To his surprise, Mrs. Selina shook her head. "I can't, son. What do you mean you can't? It's your home too. I have commitments. My students are waiting for me early tomorrow. I can't just disappear. Mom, you're on the streets. You need medical care, comfort, safety. Mrs. Selina smiled serenely. I need dignity, James, and I found that even without a roof over my head. I won't abandon the people who didn't abandon me when I needed them most. The firmness of that statement silenced James. He recognized in his mother's eyes the same determination he had inherited, the one that had led him to success, but which in her manifested in a much nobler form. At least let me take you to a doctor, he insisted, noticing the persistent cough she tried to conceal. And then we can talk about solutions that respect your commitments. After some resistance, Mrs. Selina agreed. At the private hospital where James took her, the diagnosis was concerning: moderate malnutrition, anemia, early pneumonia, and an untreated urinary tract infection. Hospitalization was immediate. In the hospital room, as he watched his mother finally sleeping in a clean, comfortable bed after receiving the first medications, James made a silent promise. He would not only repair the damage caused, but would transform that painful experience into something that could help others who, like his mother, had been forgotten by society and by their own families. Mount Sinai Hospital had never witnessed a patient receiving so many unusual visitors. On Mrs. Selina's third day of hospitalization, the receptionist watched, perplexed, as a line of people formed in the corridor. Elderly men in simple clothes, women with children in their arms, young people with tattoos and piercings, some clearly homeless. Everyone wanted to see the sidewalk teacher, James, who had practically moved into his mother's room, transforming a corner into an improvised office, watched that parade of affection with admiration. I never imagined you had so many friends, he commented, as Mr. Jenkins, the candy seller at traffic lights, proudly showed Mrs. Selina that he could now write his full name without help. They're not just friends, she replied, adjusting herself on the pillows. They are my community. That word, community, echoed in James's mind for days. As his mother physically recovered, he delved into a deep internal restructuring of values and priorities. The entrepreneur who had built an empire based on efficiency and results now confronted concepts like belonging, solidarity, and genuine purpose. In parallel, James did not neglect the legal aspect of the situation. The criminal lawyer he hired confirmed his suspicions. Fiona Davies had orchestrated an elaborate scheme of resource diversion. The police found evidence that she had done something similar in at least 2 other cases. Successful entrepreneurs who were convinced to institutionalize elderly relatives in luxury residential facilities that never existed. She is a fugitive, the responsible detective informed during a video conference. But we found traces of financial transactions in Mexico. It's only a matter of time until we locate her. 2 weeks after hospitalization, Mrs. Selina was medically discharged. The moment James had so feared had arrived. Where would his mother go? I've already prepared your room in my penthouse, he said, trying to sound casual as he helped his mother organize her few belongings. View of Central Park, jacuzzi tub, 65-inch TV. Mrs. Selina interrupted him with a gentle gesture. Son, I appreciate it very much. But we've already talked about this. Mom, you still need care. The doctor was clear about the need for a balanced diet, adequate rest, continuation of medications, and I can have all that without living in a luxury apartment that has nothing to do with me. James sighed, frustrated. So where? Back to the awning? To the shelter? I won't allow that. Mrs. Selina observed her son with that look that, since his childhood, always made him reconsider his most uncompromising positions. There are options beyond the extremes. James, there always are. That afternoon, James accompanied his mother to the Bronx. The old house, closed for over a year, had been cleaned and prepared by a team he hired in the preceding days. Everything was as before, the same simple but well-maintained furniture, the plants in the backyard replanted, the crochet curtains made by Mrs. Selina decades ago. Upon opening the door, Mrs. Selina deeply inhaled the familiar scent, running her hands over the furniture as if to reconnect with each object, each memory. This is temporary, Mom, James explained, while we look for a more suitable, safer place. Mrs. Selina didn't respond immediately. She walked to the backyard, where the old mango tree still shaded the wooden bench that James's late father had built. She sat there observing the jabuticaba tree, the newly planted aromatic herb beds. "This is my place," she finally said. "But I agree it needs adjustments." The adjustments ended up being a complete structural renovation of the house, preserving its original appearance and layout, but updating all the electrical, plumbing, and security systems. James hired the best architect specializing in historic home retrofits, with the express condition that every change be personally approved by Mrs. Selina. "I want a discreet but comprehensive monitoring system," James instructed the security team, "and a panic button that immediately alerts the nearest security." "Are you turning your mother's house into Fort Knox?" the technician joked. "I'm ensuring no one ever harms her again," James replied, humorlessly. During the 6 weeks the renovation lasted, Mrs. Selina stayed at James's apartment, as he had so wished. However, to her son's frustration, she insisted on visiting South Jamaica, Queens daily to continue her sidewalk classes. He even offered a commercial space for her to set up a proper community school, but Mrs. Selina was unyielding. "The sidewalk is where they are, son. If I move to a building, even a simple one, many won't come. Education has to go to the people, not wait for them to come to it." One Saturday afternoon, while Mrs. Selina was taking a well-deserved nap after an intense morning of classes, James decided to personally see his mother's work. He dressed in simple clothes, jeans, a t-shirt, sneakers, and drove to South Jamaica, Queens, parking a few blocks from the spot. What he found left him speechless. On the sidewalk where his mother taught, someone had painted a colorful alphabet on the wall. Organized crates served as improvised benches and tables. A string hung with clothesline displayed students' work, words written on notebook pages, drawings, even simple poems. "You must be her son," said a voice behind James. He turned and found a woman of approximately 40, carrying shopping bags. "I'm Lucy, the owner of the corner market. Your mother taught me how to do calculations without a calculator. I save a lot at the end of the month now." James extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, James." "I know who you are," she replied with an enigmatic smile. "Mrs. Selina never spoke ill of you, you know, even when we thought you had abandoned her." The statement hit James like a punch to the stomach. "She's incredible." "She is," and she transformed this stretch of sidewalk into the best school we've ever had around here. In the following minutes, other local residents approached. Each one had a story about how Mrs. Selina had impacted their lives. The young man who managed to pass the test for a stock clerk job after basic math classes, the elderly woman who could now read medicine labels by herself, the teenager who had dropped out of formal school but returned to study thanks to the patient method of the sidewalk teacher. That visit changed something fundamental in James. On the way back, an idea began to form in his mind. Not a business idea, as he was accustomed to, but something deeper, more significant. When Mrs. Selina finally returned to her renovated house in the Bronx, James surprised her with a special gift. In the backyard, where there had once been only a small garden, there was now a modern, well-lit, and fully equipped structure. "What is this?" Mrs. Selina asked, confused. "Your new community center," James replied proudly. "A classroom with complete materials, a kitchen for cooking classes and meal production for distribution, a community laundry, a basic health clinic that will receive volunteer doctors twice a week." Mrs. Selina walked through the space with wondrous eyes, touching the textbooks, the ergonomic tables, the state-of-the-art whiteboard. "It's beautiful, son, but that doesn't replace the sidewalk. The sidewalk is still where many are, where many need to be found." James smiled. "It's not to replace. It's to complement. You continue going to them, but now you have a place to invite them to come when they're ready for the next step." The tears in Mrs. Selina's eyes were the only response needed. In the following weeks, as the Selina Miller Community Center began to operate and attract not only the sidewalk students, but also other neighborhood residents, James delved into a deep investigation into the situation of abandoned or vulnerable elderly people in the United States. The numbers shocked him. Thousands of elderly people living in precarious situations, many of them with families who had simply forgotten them or deliberately pushed them away. Existing public policies were insufficient, public shelters overcrowded, elderly protection services underfunded. One afternoon, visiting his mother and finding her teaching a group of women how to prepare nutritious meals with accessible ingredients, James finally verbalized the idea that had been maturing. "Mom, I want to create a foundation." "A real foundation, not that facade Fiona invented." Mrs. Selina looked up from the bread dough she was kneading. "What kind of foundation?" "One focused on vulnerable elderly people, especially those abandoned by their families. I want it to be called the New Dawn Foundation." "Beautiful name," Mrs. Selina commented, returning to knead the dough. "And why are you telling me?" "Because I want you to be the honorary director." Mrs. Selina stopped again, wiping her hands on her apron. "Honorary director? What exactly does that mean?" "It means no important decision will be made without your approval. You will guide the values, the mission, the projects. You will be the heart of the foundation." An enigmatic smile formed on Mrs. Selina's lips. "With one condition." "What is it?" "That half of the board of directors be made up of people who have lived on the streets. People like Mr. Jenkins, like Mrs. Josephine. People who know firsthand what it's like to be invisible." James didn't hesitate. "Done." The launch of the New Dawn Foundation was not the luxurious, celebrity-filled event Fiona would have orchestrated. It took place in a public square in the Bronx, with rented plastic chairs, a simple stage and food prepared by the local community. Even so, it attracted significant press attention, especially after Mrs. Selina's story leaked to some journalists. "I don't want my mother's story exploited as marketing," James insisted with the new communication team, composed mostly of young people from marginalized communities with journalism and advertising backgrounds. "It's not marketing, James, it's awareness," argued Gabriella Shaw, the 28-year-old coordinator, a former resident of South Jamaica, Queens. "People need to know that this happens, that elderly people are abandoned every day, often by families with resources." On stage, James presented the foundation without mentioning his own story. He spoke about statistics, about the invisibility of homeless elderly people, about humanized care projects that would be implemented. When he finally called Mrs. Selina, identifying her only as honorary director, the audience reacted with a spontaneous ovation. Many there knew the sidewalk teacher and her journey. "We don't need enormous buildings with the names of important people," Mrs. Selina said into the microphone, with the serenity that characterized her. "We need protective networks woven with threads of respect and dignity. Old age is not a disease to be hidden. It is a phase of life that deserves to be lived fully, with autonomy and meaning." Among those present was Marianne Wells, the journalist who had approached James months earlier with incisive questions about his mother's whereabouts. After the event, she approached him. "Mr. Miller, do you remember me?" James smiled. "Of course. I owe you thanks." Those uncomfortable questions were the final push I needed to seek the truth. Marianne seemed surprised by the reaction. "I came prepared for hostility." "Real journalism is uncomfortable, Ms. Wells, and discomfort is sometimes what makes us wake up." The article Marianne published a week later was balanced and profound. It recounted Mrs. Selina's story, the fraud perpetrated by Fiona, James's desperate search, and the birth of the foundation, but it went further. It investigated the silent epidemic of elderly abandonment in the United States, the failures in public policies, and the legislative gaps that allowed such cases to occur. The article went viral, generating a national debate on the topic. Soon, the New Dawn Foundation was receiving more donations and volunteers than it could manage. The temporary space they had rented in Astoria, Queens, could no longer accommodate the daily growing team. "We need to structure ourselves better," James commented during a board meeting, observing Mrs. Selina, who presided over the session with the same firmness with which she previously commanded her sidewalk classes. "We suggest purchasing that old school building in Harlem, New York City. It has enough space for all operations and is close to 3 bus lines. Is it wheelchair accessible?" asked Mr. Jenkins, now an official board member and head of the Infrastructure Committee. "Many of our beneficiaries have reduced mobility. Yes, we've already checked, and the cost of the necessary adaptations is within the budget." Mrs. Josephine, another former sidewalk student who now joined the board, raised her hand. "And what about the partner shelters? Do we have the first 5 confirmed?" Gabriella, who in addition to coordinating communication also served as executive secretary, confirmed, "Yes, all have signed the transparent oversight agreement. They accepted our conditions, unscheduled inspections, sealed suggestion and complaint boxes that only we open, cameras in common areas." "Perfect," Mrs. Selina approved. "Now let's move to the next item on the agenda. The public hearing at the City Council on the situation of the elderly in New York City. The rapid expansion of the New Dawn Foundation and its innovative approach, combining radical transparency, beneficiary participation in management, and rigorous oversight of services, began to disturb established interests, especially the companies that for years had managed public shelters and hostels through millionaire contracts with city halls, offering services of questionable quality. The first retaliation came in the form of a report in a sensationalist newspaper, insinuating that the foundation was merely a strategy by James to clean up his image after years of neglecting his own mother. The article distorted facts, omitted Fiona's fraud, and presented anonymous sources who allegedly witnessed James's mistreatment of Mrs. Selina. "Do we ignore it or sue?" Gabriella asked, concerned about the impact on donations. "Neither," James replied after consulting his mother. "We will respond with absolute transparency." The next day, the foundation published on its website a detailed timeline of events, including police reports, bank statements showing the diversions, testimonies from Mrs. Marlene and others involved, and a full report from the independent audit they had hired to examine the entire situation. Complementing the material, an emotional video showed Mrs. Selina recounting her experience on the streets and her reconnection with her son. The public's response was overwhelmingly positive. Donations, instead of decreasing, tripled the following week. Radical transparency had proven to be the best strategy. However, the attacks continued. Inspectors appeared at the community center in the Bronx, alleging anonymous complaints of sanitary irregularities. An administrative process questioned the legality of granting public land for one of the foundation's projects. Fake profiles on social media spread rumors about resource diversions. "We stirred up a hornet's nest," Mr. Jenkins commented during an emergency meeting. "The misery market is too lucrative for them to leave us alone." "We are prepared for this," James assured. "Our accounting is audited monthly, all processes documented, all decisions recorded in minutes. We have nothing to hide." While facing the external storm, an internal conflict also developed. Part of the team, especially the younger, newly hired professionals, questioned whether the foundation was not becoming James's private cause, a way to atone for his guilt over what had happened to Mrs. Selina. The criticisms reached James's ears through Gabriella, always direct in her positions. "Some people think this is all about you, not about the elderly," she said during a private meeting, "that it's more about easing your conscience than transforming the system." Instead of reacting defensively, James reflected deeply on the criticism. The next morning, he convened a general assembly with all employees and volunteers. "You are right to question," he began, surprising everyone with his frankness. "This foundation was born from my pain, my guilt, my need for reparation. I won't deny that. But an imperfect origin does not condemn what can flourish from it." He then proposed a radical restructuring of governance. The board would be expanded to include more beneficiaries and independent experts. An ethics committee with an external majority would oversee all actions. He himself would relinquish the veto power he had initially reserved. "I don't want this to be James's foundation," he concluded. "I want it to be all of our foundation, especially those who need it." The proposal was approved by acclamation. Mrs. Selina, who watched discreetly from the back of the room, felt immense pride in her son. He was finally rediscovering that sparkle in his eyes that she had so feared had been lost. 6 months after its founding, the New Dawn had already established a protective network, serving over 1,000 vulnerable elderly people in New York City. The model was expanding to other major cities through partnerships with local organizations. An application developed by TM Solutions allowed any citizen to report cases of abandoned or homeless elderly people, activating a network of volunteers and professionals. In parallel, James implemented significant changes in his company. He created a paid leave policy for employees who needed to care for elderly parents. He established a reverse mentoring program where senior employees learned from younger ones. He reduced his own participation in day-to-day management, delegating more responsibilities to dedicate more time to the foundation and his mother. It was during this period of apparent stabilization that the past unexpectedly returned. During a foundation event in Denver, Colorado, where they were presenting the shelter oversight model to potential local partners, one of the participants recognized a woman in the audience trying to go unnoticed. Dyed hair, different glasses but the same characteristic gestures. "That's the woman who harmed Mrs. Selena," exclaimed the man, pointing to Fiona Davies. The former advisor tried to flee but was detained by event security until the police arrived. Subsequent investigations revealed that she had returned to the United States with a false identity and set up a new consultancy, this time offering ethical reputation management services for politicians and public companies. Fiona's arrest brought a whirlwind of emotions for James and Mrs. Selena. Both were called to testify in the trial, reliving painful memories. The press naturally, intensely covered the case. During the trial, in a moment that captured national attention, Fiona finally confronted Mrs. Selena. "You were an obstacle to his success," she declared with surprising coldness. "Important people can't have simple mothers appearing in public, speaking incorrectly, wearing unfashionable clothes. I did what needed to be done to protect his image." Mrs. Selena, who had kept her eyes down until then, looked up to face the woman who had caused her so much harm. "You understood nothing about success," she replied with a calm, clear voice. "Nor about mothers." Fiona Davies's conviction to 12 years in prison for embezzlement, criminal association, and abandonment of a vulnerable person brought a strange feeling of closure to James and Mrs. Selena. It wasn't exactly relief or satisfaction. Both had evolved beyond the desire for revenge, but a sense that a painful cycle was finally complete. "What did you feel when you saw her handcuffed?" James asked his mother the night after the trial, as they shared tea on the porch of the house in the Bronx. Mrs. Selena reflected for some moments, observing the stars that dotted the New York City sky. Rare, but present for those who knew how to look. "Pity," she finally replied. "Pity for someone who built her life around such empty values, who used so much talent to destroy, when she could have created beautiful things." James nodded, recognizing the wisdom in his mother's words. "I don't think I'll ever be as compassionate as you. Don't confuse compassion with weakness, son. To understand doesn't mean to accept or easily forgive. It just means not letting hatred consume us from within." That conversation marked the beginning of a new phase for both. The New Dawn Foundation, already established and growing organically, began to evolve into increasingly innovative and transformative initiatives. One of the most successful projects arose from an apparently simple idea by Anthony, one of the board members who had lived on the streets for over a decade before meeting Mrs. Selena. "Why don't we create community gardens in the renovated shelters?" he suggested during a meeting. "Many elderly people come from the countryside. They have knowledge about plants. This would give purpose, improve nutrition, and could even generate a small income from selling surpluses." The Roots of Wisdom project started in 3 partner shelters and quickly expanded to 15. Elderly people, previously depressed and isolated, rediscovered purpose by cultivating vegetables, medicinal herbs, and flowers. Schools began bringing students to learn from the masters of the earth. High-end restaurants started buying exclusive aromatic herbs grown by the elderly. In parallel, the community center in the Bronx became a model of intergenerational integration. Mrs. Selena's sidewalk classroom evolved into an innovative educational system that attracted researchers and educators from across the country. Her unique method, which combined literacy, citizenship, and popular knowledge, was documented and replicated in marginalized communities of other major cities. "You should write a book," suggested Gabriella, who now headed the Foundation's education department. Mrs. Selena laughed. "Who will want to read the stories of an old retired teacher?" "The whole country," Gabriella assured. "Your story has inspired many people, and your teaching method works where all traditional pedagogies fail." After much insistence, Mrs. Selena accepted, but with one condition, that each chapter be co-written with one of my students. Words That Liberate Education on the Margins was launched 10 months later in an emotional ceremony at the Bowery Mission Lower East Side in downtown New York City. Instead of the traditional book signing night at a bookstore, Mrs. Selena preferred the event to take place where words were most needed. The book became an unexpected publishing phenomenon, translated into 5 languages and adopted as a reference in social pedagogy courses. As the foundation flourished, James faced his own challenges and transformations. TM Solutions continued to prosper, but his role in the company had changed significantly. He had distanced himself from day-to-day operations, focusing on specific projects that combined technology and social impact. His new corporate mantra, innovation with purpose, reflected this shift in priorities. Not everyone approved of this redirection. Shareholders questioned whether his excessive involvement with the foundation was harming financial results. Some senior executives, accustomed to James being obsessively focused on growth, found his new, more balanced and humane approach strange. "They're saying in the hallways that you've lost your ambition," commented Raphael, his CFO and longtime friend. "I haven't lost ambition," James replied calmly. "I've just found a broader definition of success." The true test of this new philosophy came when TM Solutions received a $1 billion acquisition offer from an American technology conglomerate. The offer was extremely generous, and many considered it madness to refuse. For weeks, James analyzed the proposal from all angles. He consulted lawyers, financial advisors, the board of directors. Finally, he did something unusual. He brought the matter to a family dinner at his mother's house in the Bronx. Between one dish and another of the delicious chicken and rice prepared by Mrs. Selena, James explained the pros and cons of the acquisition. "If I accept, I'll have almost unlimited resources to expand the foundation," he pondered. "We could create units across the United States, perhaps even in other countries. But I would lose control over the company I built from scratch, and many jobs would likely be eliminated in the reorganization." Mrs. Selena listened attentively, chewing slowly as she always did when reflecting on something important. "You already know the answer, son," she finally said. "You're just looking for someone to confirm what your heart has already decided." James smiled. "How do you always know?" "Because I've known that sparkle in your eyes since you were 6 years old and decided to build a van out of cardboard boxes to take your friends to see the world." The following week, James formally refused the acquisition offer. Instead, he proposed a radical internal restructuring. He transformed TM Solutions into a privately held company with a public purpose, amending its bylaws to include social and environmental objectives alongside financial ones. He created a pioneering profit-sharing program that included not only employees, but also communities impacted by the company's operations. He established an inclusive hiring policy, prioritizing vulnerable individuals, including seniors over 60, for roles suited to their skills. "We are redefining what it means to be an American technology company in the 21st century," he declared during the official announcement of the restructuring. One Sunday morning, while helping his mother prepare lunch for a group of former sidewalk students who would visit the house, James received an unexpected call. It was the president of New York University, inviting him to be the speaker at the next School of Engineering graduation ceremony. "It would be an honor, President. But I confess I'm surprised by the invitation." "Your former professors insisted," the president explained. "They say your journey represents the kind of engineer we want to train, someone who uses technology to solve real societal problems, not just to accumulate wealth." James accepted the invitation, but asked for a special condition that his mother could accompany him on stage. On the day of the ceremony, the packed auditorium witnessed something unusual. One of the country's most successful entrepreneurs beginning his speech with a painful and humble confession. "I abandoned the one who loved me most," James said, his voice choked with emotion. The silence in the auditorium was absolute. Many students moved, took out their cell phones and began calling their parents and grandparents right there. "I abandoned not physically at first, but with my absence, my distraction, my outsourcing of affection, allowing professional success to become more important than the fundamental bonds that shaped me as a human being." He looked at Mrs. Selena, sitting discreetly beside him, wearing a simple but elegant outfit, her eyes brimming with pride. It took almost losing her to understand that no achievement is worth the sacrifice of our humanity, that no success compensates for the emptiness of an ungiven hug, a postponed visit, a denied presence. The speech went viral on social media. In the following weeks, the New Dawn Foundation received hundreds of reports of family reconciliations, inspired by James's words. Estranged parents and children, siblings in conflict, broken friendships. Many found in the entrepreneur's words the impetus they needed to rebuild seemingly destroyed bridges. In response to this spontaneous movement, the foundation created the Reconnections program, facilitating family reunions with psychological support and professional mediation when necessary. In just 3 months, over 200 families were reunited through the initiative. On Mrs. Selena's 75th birthday, James organized a special celebration at the community center. Hundreds of people attended, former students, neighbors from the Bronx, companions from her street days, foundation volunteers, young people who had been inspired by her story. As a gift, James revealed that he had acquired a plot of land next to her house, where the first unit of the New Dawn network of intergenerational centers would be built, spaces where children, youth and seniors would live and learn from each other. Mrs. Selena, visibly emotional, gathered everyone in the garden. There, with the help of a 5-year-old child, the granddaughter of one of her first sidewalk students, she planted a young dogwood tree. As everyone observed the small ritual, she affixed a simple plaque next to the newly planted tree. May today's shade protect those who tomorrow need rest. James, observing the scene, finally understood the true essence of the transformation they had lived. It wasn't about grand projects or impressive numbers, but about rescuing one by one the fundamental human bonds that the contemporary world systematically weakened. The journey that had begun with pain, betrayal and abandonment had transformed into a movement of reconnection, care and presence. What Fiona had failed to understand, with all her manipulative cunning, was that true power didn't come from artificially constructed images, but from the authenticity of relationships and the courage to face one's own flaws. That night, when all the guests had left and only mother and son remained sitting on the porch under the starry sky, Mrs. Selena took James's hands in hers. "You know, son, on the hardest nights on the streets, I would look at the stars and think of you, not with anger, but with hope. Hope? Yes, hope that one day you would remember who you really are. Not the successful entrepreneur, not the face in magazines, but that boy with bright eyes who wanted to change the world with his inventions." James felt tears stream freely down his face. "So you never gave up on me." "Mothers rarely give up," Mrs. Selena smiled, "even when the whole world says they should." The small dogwood sapling in the garden, still fragile but deeply rooted, swayed gently with the night breeze. Like it, the transformation they had begun was still just a beginning, but its roots already extended far beyond what they could see, touching lives, inspiring changes, creating new possibilities for connection in a world that so needed to relearn the art of true encounters. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that James and Mrs. Selena's journey has deeply touched your hearts. This narrative reminds us that it is never too late to reconnect, rebuild, and rediscover our most essential bonds. If this story stirred emotions in you, don't keep that feeling to yourself. Share it with us. Subscribe to our channel to receive weekly American stories that explore the complexities of love, family, and redemption. Leave a like to help us reach more people with these transformative narratives, and tell us in the comments if you have ever lived a life-changing reconciliation experience. Remember, just like Mrs. Selena's dogwood tree, the stories we share here are seeds that can blossom in your heart and transform realities. Until our next meeting.